Thanks, guys. We've been working on getting a few more chairs out here. The extra chairs weren't in the usual spot. We're looking for something to take like that. So welcome to the November meeting of the Colorado Springs Astronautical Society. My name is Scott Donnell, and I'm the current president, not for much longer. And one of the first things, we're going to have a great program. Hope everybody had a nice Thanksgiving. And so with that, I would like to ask if there are any visitors or very recent new members in the. Wow. Okay. So I'm going to work from front. I'm going to work from back to front. Okay. Next time I can make a number. So just take a moment. Please stand up. And tell us about yourself, your interests in astronomy, and kind of what brought you here. And so let's start in the back. Are you two together? Yeah. So there you go. Stories. We just recently moved here for the last days of that. Remember the astronaut society there. We're happy on the front, Minnesota. There's the government things there, and also food things for that. So we can make the tour of the astronaut society. And so we're going to be here for a while. So something I feel very nice about. Now we're going to go over the Minnesota Astronautical Society. Very familiar with that club. All right, well, thank you very much. Who else in the back row? Wait, yes, sir.
My name's James Love. Just moved here. I'm an aviation officer at Fort Carson. I'm brand new to this. I used to look at stars with my father growing up. He had a telescope and everything, but I've completely fallen out since then. Trying to get that covered.
Great. Well, yeah, to let you know too that we kind of pride ourselves as an organization that when you interact with us, come to our meetings and come to our star parties, and generally interact. There's never any pressure to feel like you have to know so much, right? We're very much all into learning, and we can learn from one another. So in a sense, we're all kind of beginners in many ways. So I'm glad to have. Okay, who's next? Right there, yes.
I'm Greg Kinney. Just sort of recently moved to the area. I've got a telescope, a remote observatory just in Denver. Interest in exoplanet light curves and AAVSO stuff. Things like that.
I'll be interested in talking with you on the break. We have another member, Cliff Kotnick, not here tonight. But he also
I've emailed with him. Yeah, he and I are going to get together Thursday night.
Oh, good. He's one of the 3 volunteers of the Red Dot campaign with the AVSO.
Okay.
And he and I attended the AVSO annual meeting in Nashville. And he received his award for 1,000 CCD observations.
Oh,
so,
excellent.
It's great. Glad to hear it. We'll be interested to hear more about your imaging efforts. All right, next.
We have 2 just stuck in.
You just stuck in.
Yes.
Who just stuck in? All right. So you have to stand up and just tell us a little bit about yourself, why you're here.
Well, we're here.
This is the knitting club, right?
Where are we?
Oh, this is an AA. I'm sorry.
I'm Deanna, and I brought my friend Radha, and she came with me because I was interested. I found out about the society just last year. I've lived here for a very long time and just went, oh, wow. So a friend of ours had invited us last summer. We came out, and it was cloudy. So I thought it was fascinating. I thought, so let's catch another day. And we know, is Bruce here?
He will be.
Okay, I was like, oh, wrong place. So yes, we met Bruce Lookout through our veterans transitioning through Mount Carmel. And so he said, come out because he's speaking today or something like that. So we're here.
Now, just because you have a night with an experience with cloudy night doesn't mean you have to wait a whole year.
Right.
some of them do.
Yeah, no.
Okay, welcome. Was there someone else that popped in?
Right next to her.
I tried.
Also a friend of Bruce as well, and we're excited to be here. I had no idea this was here, so I'm excited.
Very good, thank you. Are you fairly new?
Yeah, it's covered for a while.
Oh, been here for a while, okay. So I thought I saw your hand go, okay, you're understanding now.
Charles was good, and in Colorado Springs for 17 years now. And I always was just in the Straters as a boy, and found out about the Society of Blues also, who was writers work. I recently retired, so I did a couple of stock parties. And we.
And if any of us get lost in our galaxy, you're the guy to see.
That's right.
Okay.
I don't know where the rest are.
That's close on your map.
That's kind of important. Okay. Yes.
So I'm Aiden. I go to West Middle School. It's my dad. Just sort of, tagging along with me. Yeah.
You're walking in the talk, you're going to find you a good size scope, right?
I'm Kim Virginietti. I've lived here for 40 years. I think I'm just trying to class about 40 years ago at Colorado College. But Aiden's got raised, and
Yeah.
we had the good fortune to get work around the observatory for the first time a couple years back. That's all the time.
Very good. Well, we're glad that you decided to come tonight, and hopefully we meet or see your expectations. And if we don't, tell us.
Everyone else got
Let's see, anyone else? Yes.
John Campbell, I'm the native of Colorado Springs. Always had an interest in astronomy, but at this stage in my life, I would be considered an ultra newbie. The subject type of thing, and was watching by my very good friend Mike Fisher.
Very good. So, well, and hopefully you'll find that there's lots to learn, that we are very helpful and help you learn, and so glad that you're here. And I would be remiss, I know Fred's our secretary, I should mention that with me present tonight is my vice president, Mr. Jim Urim, secretary, Fred Goodman, member at large, Mr. Doug Cook, and that's it because our treasurer is not here tonight. Now, our secretary, Fred, maintains the attendance roster in the back, number one. So if not sooner than maybe during our extended break, you'll have an opportunity to go back there and please sign our attendance roster. Because that helps Fred. That's his his counting exercise. Yeah, he has to calibrate his abacus. So. And then in addition, Fred has also put together some visitor cards in the back. So if you're visiting and you would like to fill out a card, it's basically just giving us some contact information so we can kind of circle back with you after the meeting and see if you enjoyed it, you're going to come back, and if not, then why. So,
And please, where you have the email entry, print legibly so that when I email you, I know who I can put the information in properly for.
glasses, but instead, okay.
The people writing need them.
All right, so I covered nice with that. Okay, very good. So what I'd like to do is to get an update. So one of the things that we do as a club, if you're a member of our club, there's a number of benefits. One of them being that we forego a meeting like this in the month of December, i.e. next month. Have a fantastic holiday party here at the Space Symposium Area 51 room. It's a potluck. We've got a bartender that comes in and serves us alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks. We've got a drawing, or rather a gift exchange, lots of good food. So it's really, really a great time, but you must be a member to participate. And our director of social activities, Mr. George White, sitting right here, is orchestrating all that. So George, I'd like to ask you to get up and give us a fill in of what's going on.
Well, Scott just covered it all, just about. You should have seen an email, hopefully, that went out. Sent out 175 emails, had about 18 that came back with various forms of undeliverables. So if you didn't get one, that's why. As Scott said, the event is here. You go out the door here, straight to the other corner. That's the Area 51 down there. It is a potluck. We did it here last year. It went over really, really well. We've got it set up. I believe the officers are providing the turkey and the ham like last year,
And
I hope.
we have, Jim Urim is providing smoked turkey.
Smoked turkey this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is a sign-up sheet that's working its way around here. So if you know you're gonna come, so it's next Saturday, it's the 9th. Starts at 5. 2 Saturdays? Saturday, December 9th, whenever that is. Push down. And this year is from 5 to 9, so from 5 to 6, we do the gather around talking thing, and then we'll hit the food. We do a white elephant gift exchange thing.
It's a pencil.
Okay, so if you'd like to participate in that, just bring the gift in, wrap it, throw it in a paper bag, wrap it in newspaper. We don't care. It can be anything you want. There is going to be a bartender on site.
Right.
Okay, bartender is going to be here. That's really the highlights. Again, we've done it in various places over the years. We did do it here last year, and it went over really, really well. It was a good event. The weather cooperated. Everything went over really well. So, any questions about it? Like I said, sign-up sheet is there. There's also a sign-up sheet on csastro.org in the forums. You go under CSAS discussions. There's a little thing in there. So if you don't get the sign-up sheet, make up your mind later. You can go on the forum and just say what you like to bring. Or if you want to, just email me back. Let me know who's coming. All I need is your name, how many people, and what you like to bring. Okay?
Is it going to be on the calendar?
It's already on the calendar. It's been out there for about a month or two now.
Okay, we're gonna bring up the calendar just to verify.
Unless I'm lying. It should be. Yep. Right.
There it is, 5 p.m. Potluck holiday party.
Yep. Okay. Any questions about potluck?
Bring the pot.
I'll say we'll take a look at the list. Write-in option. Strictly a write-in option.
I need what? Okay. Lloyd, there should be some chairs around. There's one over there. There's one back here. You don't have to stand up. You can if you want.
There's like 3 or 4 people.
Yeah. All right. So the next thing is I'd like to have Dave Warner.
Yep.
If you would please, Dave Warner does this excellent "What's Up in the Night Sky" every month in this meeting. And don't forget lights.
Well, get the lights.
So again, backed by popular demand, Mr. Dave Warner.
All right, and actually, since we're not going to have a meeting this next month, I cover, and always in this month, November, I'll cover December and January. The bad news is that December, January, we're kind of devoid of planets, but there are some in the morning time. We'll talk about those. So this is the what's up for December 2017 and January to get us to our next meeting. So next slide. So one of the things is December 13th and 14th. If you look, I get all of the stuff. I get it from the HTTPS, the inthesky.org website. I can go and you can see what's happening in the skies. You know that you can look at different objects to look at. So this is just kind of a capture of a couple of things. I also refer to the 2017 and soon to be 2018 Royal Astronomy Society's book, handbook. I forget what the name of it is. RASC, R-A-S-C. And I'm waiting on my 2018 book to arrive in the mail, so hopefully that'll come over December. But on December 13th and 14th, the moon and Jupiter and Mars are going to form a nice triangle in the morning sky, so you can get up on any one of those couple of nights on the 13th and 14th and see that nice triangle in the sky. You can see there's Jupiter and Mars. Now Mars is still, on that other side of the sun. You try to look at it through your telescope. You probably won't see a lot of details or anything, but we're going to get paid off in dividends coming in 2018. We'll be talking about that in the months to come, that Mars is going to be the closest it's been since 2003, which is the closest it's been. 2003 was the closest it's been in 6,000 years. So this Mars apparition in 2018, I'm already getting excited about it. And it's not 2018.
It still won't be the size of the moon.
That's right. But we'll see those posts on Facebook for sure. Now, you might have heard, if you go back, you might have heard on December 14th that the Earth is going to,
be just whisked by just by a hair's breadth away of an asteroid, 3200 Paphion, and that's the source of the Gemini meteor shower on the 14th of December. There's about 100 meteors that you could maybe see per hour of that meteor shower. So get out, look towards Gemini. Next slide, and it'll show kind of give you a highlight of where to look. You'll look towards the constellation Gemini. You'll see those meteors racing by. But don't worry too much about that asteroid, because that asteroid is actually going to be 27 times further away than the moon. So that hair's breadth past the moon. I guess in astronomical terms, maybe that's pretty close for a half a mile wide or a mile wide asteroid to go by the Earth, but well far away and out for us to not have to worry about it this year. If you go to the next slide, it'll show. If you look on December 10th, you can, again, this was from heavensabove.com, another website you can go to look for these things. You can look at, there's in the constellation of Riga, there's a place you can go and look for this asteroid and see it moving across the sky. You can look at other finder charts to find how to find this asteroid and see it. It's pretty dim, so unless you have a decent-sized telescope of about 8 inches or 10 inches or larger, it'll be difficult for you to see, especially in light-polluted skies. So just something to keep in mind. Kind of cool. You can look on SLU, and there's probably other sources of where you can watch this live on the internet. Next slide. How about in January? Well, we have another meteor shower, the quantitative meteor shower, named after a constellation that isn't up there anymore. There is a nearly full moon on the 4th of January, so we're not going to be able to see that 90 meteors per hour because of that full moon. But that's always a fun one to get out there and see, even though that it's a little cold. Its origins are from the asteroid 2003 EH1. And then, again, that triangle of the Mars, Jupiter, and the moon is on January 10th and 11th. That was an even tighter triangle, and those will make the news. So there'll be reminders out there to see those. So next slide. And then, excuse that this says 2017 because it's an old graphic, but the radian is the same, doesn't change. So if you want to go see the quantitative meteor shower in January of 2018, that's where you'll be looking for it to be coming out across the sky. That's a really neat meteor shower to see that. And I think that's it. Next slide. I think that's it for this month. We'll see you in January. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Oh, yeah, very nice.
Ready for the bright lights?
Alexa.
Okay, so I promised Daryl back here that I'd give him just a moment or two, and I think Daryl, just maybe take a minute or two to tell us about your telescope for sale, and then during our extended break, there'll be plenty of opportunity for people to come back and talk to you about everything. So go ahead and do your intro.
Right. This is a Stellar View SVR 105, 105 millimeter telescope. It's an F7, 735 millimeter focal length, carbon fiber tube, Starlight Express feather touch focuser, and split aluminum rings, Lasmondi mounting plate here. This scope in its current iteration with Stellar View is the SVR 102B, and it costs $3,055 plus shipping. This scope that I'm holding in my hands is $2,200. It's like new, it doesn't have a mark on it. It's a magnificent scope for either visual observing or for astroimaging. And if you have any questions, I've got detailed specifications on it back here. It comes with a case, a field flattener for astrophotography, and it's a great scope.
Well, he's giving you a great deal because he's missing the objective.
What's the objective about that?
Yeah, I'm giving you great deals because if it doesn't sell tonight or in the next week or so, I'm going to put it on Astromart, and that's always a pain in the butt. having to pack these things up and ship them off to somebody. The guy who's the most interested is always the guy the farthest away.
Now, have you posted this on our forums?
Yeah.
So you got that out there?
Yeah.
No takers yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so if you're interested in taking a look at Daryl's scope, when we get to the break, there'll be plenty of time for you to go back and take a look. So, observing reports, I want to start out with photos or images. Who had an image? Somebody had an image? Matt? No? Who had an image? Somebody had, no images. Images, going once, going twice? All right. Observing reports. I think I'm losing my mind. Observing reports then. So, and again, we'll start from the back of the room, we go to the front. So, no one can say, oh, it's been cloudy the entire time since last week. I know for a fact that it's got some beautiful clear nights. So, any observing reports? I'll just open up to the whole room. So just raise your hand. Do you have anything you'd like to report? Rick?
Well, I did have another sketch to offer.
Oh, that's what I was, that's right. Okay, well,
But it's not a photo.
sorry, I heard image. Okay.
And usually there's a lot of really good photos. This is the Eastern Vale. Did the sketch at Okie-Tex, Kenton, Oklahoma in September. 79 power and an 03 filter. And that was my effort.
Very nice.
Well, it looks like a photo. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Well done. Very well.
Very nicely done. Okay, so any other observing reports? Brad?
Yes, it wasn't planned, but last Friday, Tom DeClue was kind enough to help me get more familiar with trying to do my sky modeling with my new mount and a new controller. And in the process, we checked it by doing some go-tos. And in a 30mm eyepiece, we had a phenomenal view of M45. Because they're spread out as you can understand, but still the stars were bright and crisp and looked really nice. And then we went over to M42, and then in the center of the eyepiece was the trapezium. So we were really happy about how that went, and it looked absolutely beautiful. So I can't wait to be up and running. Hopefully, with it permitting, one more night of getting some alignments, I'll be done.
Very good. Anyone else? Okay. Dave?
Sure.
Outreach report. So that.
All right, first of all, real quick, on December 15th, we have a star party up in Florissant Fossil Beds. If anybody doesn't know, they're a great place to go. Dark skies up there. Gets a little cold, so dress warmly if you come up. But on December 15th, you can look on our calendar and see that. We go up to Florissant Fossil Beds, and we'll be up there for about an hour and a half to 2 hours, looking hopefully under really clear skies. We'll be watching for those meteors, and as well as looking at all the different nebulas and galaxies and stars and whatever it is that we want to look at that's in the skies, and telling people about what we're looking at. So that's December. Then all of a sudden we're in 2018. I've already got 2018 scheduled so far, what we have scheduled on our calendar. So you can go onto our website and either go into the education outreach under CSAS Star Parties, and you can see all of what our public monthly free for the public events are all through there. We start off our first free to the public event that's our own CSAS event is on March 23rd at Palmer Park. And I just want to kind of mention these real quick. You can look at all the other events. There's other events beyond this that are on the calendar. That Florissant, Garden of the Gods is going to be coming up, Mueller State Park, and local schools and all sorts of things. But I wanted to talk about the one real quick on March the 23rd, because it says over here in comments, new telescope setup help. Santa's been talking to me the last couple of weeks about what do I need to make a telescope for the people here in town that are gonna get their first telescope. So there may be people over Christmas time to get a new telescope, or maybe you have one that's been sitting in your garage. in February, I'm actually going to be giving a talk on, so I got a telescope, now what? And we'll talk about all the different elements of what a telescope is and the pieces and just kind of get you started on using it. But then on March 23rd will be our opportunity to come out to a star party, bring your telescope. We'll help you, get it set up and actually use it to go look at stars and objects. If you don't want to do that, come out and just look through our telescope. So we're kind of making a progression. Then we have International Astronomy Day. We have a private star party just for our club members scheduled for May. Then we get into Rocky Mountain Star Stare is on, I guess I don't have it on this schedule here. Then you can see it's June 13th to 17th and so on. Throughout the year, we even have museum events. We're going to be doing some library talks. Bruce Bookout is working with me to set up some astronomy on tap where we're going to go in, have a pint of beer and or two and hear a talk about astronomy and get some people to laugh and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we have planned for 2018. We just continue to build and grow, and that's because of you all that help bring your knowledge and expertise and just your volunteer time to come and show people the wonderment of the night sky. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. That's all.
I think as Dave mentioned, that you are a newbie. Attending the star party is an excellent opportunity to really, get to know the night sky, how to use telescopes, and that's as hands-on as it gets. So, highly encourage you to attend star parties. Dave has set up great that you have the whole 2018 schedule put together. This guy's an outreach machine over here. So, yeah. We're going to go through. We're going to skip the treasurer's report because our treasurer's not here. We're going to roll through, and I mean roll through, some of our committee reports. So back in the back room, don't go, oh my God, committee reports, really? They're like 2-3 minutes, depending on who's talking. And then we're going to break for about 15 or 20 minutes. So, Tom is not here to talk about Rocky Mountain Star Stare, so that takes care of that. Al Shalafi is not here to talk about the Starry Meadows property. Yes.
Real quick with Rocky Mountain Star Stare, we have started hosting next year's RMSS info online. It's not all there yet, definitely not, but it's starting to show up. So, check rmss.org for more info as time goes on. I think registration is supposed to be opening January.
Probably end of January.
Yeah. So anyway, we're posting stuff. So if you want to see it as it progresses, check out rmss.org.
And this is the webpage that Stephen and others had put together, new for last year and vast improvement over our previous webpage. So thank you for that. Starry Meadows property, Al Shalafi's not here. He had nothing to report. As you could expect, we're kind of in the winter time, and so no projects going on down there. The observatory project is on. We've got the decking. We just need to get the dome installed on a work day next spring. Ted, you're going to take Brian's place to talk a little bit about the astrophotography special interest group.
So Brian Gibson isn't here, and he wanted me to tell you what's happening at the meeting, which is next week, 6:30 at his place. So astrophotography comes in really two basic parts, one of which is the capture of the image and then the processing of the image. And the capture, we're not going to deal with that, but the processing, you have the calibration and then the post-processing to bring out all the nice colors and all that other good stuff. So he's going to talk about in conjunction with using the software that he's just gotten on the first part of the processing, the calibration, which may include bad pixel mapping, analyze stars, registration, normalize, which is making everything uniform between them, and integration, which is stacking them up. And so he's going to talk about that part, using his software package and discuss how this can be done with various freeware also. So if you have not taken what you consider to be a good astrophoto, and there are probably a couple of people here who really feel that way, this would be a good chance to experience options that he's going to talk about to make your photos better. And if you know all about it and have some experience, some good experience, and have come up with good photos, you know who you are. You can come and be prepared to explain your efforts, successes and struggles, and it should be an interesting meeting for all of that. Again, it's 6:30 to 8:30 a week from today. That's Tuesday, December what? 5th, 6th, something like that. Anyway, a week from today. And this is the final meeting of the year for the imaging group. No meeting on in December. And the end of January, we're going to be hopefully doing some lucky imaging if the weather cooperates on the moon or some planet. And this was addressed in a previous meeting that we had, which sounded like it had a lot of possibilities. So if anybody has any questions about how to get in touch with Brian, he's going to be back Wednesday, or where the meeting is, I'm sitting right here and you can just come to talk.
You also have his email address, so if they want to.
Yeah, I have his email address and all that. That's how to get in touch with him.
It's posted on the calendar.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Ted. All right, so webmaster Stephen, if you would give us an update on recent web activities.
Yeah, so it's almost Christmas, if you didn't know. So Colorado Springs Astronomical Society, as a nonprofit, qualifies for a program that Amazon provides called Amazon Smile. If you haven't heard of it, you can designate, as when you shop through Amazon, you can designate a nonprofit, and a portion of what they, what you spend, they donate back to the club when you purchase through Amazon. So I wanted to show you real quick. We added a link down here in the bottom of the website for Amazon Smile. And so being that it is almost Christmas, and you might be shopping, and you might be doing that at Amazon, please consider using the link. The way it works is you just click on that link one time, and then you sign in, and it says, oh, you want to make Colorado Springs Astronomical Society your nonprofit choice. And then from then on out, all you have to do is, instead of going to Amazon.com, you just go to smile.amazon.com. And then takes care of the rest. The prices are all the same. There's no difference. Your shopping cart is the same. Everything you have there is the same. It's just by going to smile.amazon.com, it helps out the club. So we'd appreciate if people did that.
And if you start shopping, just going to Amazon and even putting stuff in your cart, you can, right before you purchase, change it to smile.amazon, and then it will give credit to who it is. So
Most of the time,
you can always remember it.
It'll also remind you.
Yeah.
Log on.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a pop-up that says, hey, don't you want to go to Smile instead?
Yeah, once you start using it. Yeah.
Perfect. So even easier than that. Even easier than what I said. So please consider that. It's just down at the bottom of the website on the right, under support CSAS. And then other thing I'd like to point out, because there's been some questions, is if you cannot make it in person to the meeting, we do live stream the meeting with this camera here, and we are live streaming now. The way you find that link is just on the website, this box right here, next meeting. Just click on the meeting link, and then down at the bottom, there's this live stream. Takes you to YouTube, and you can see everything that's going on. So we've got people online right now. So
I think also if you scroll back to the top of the page, and just if you went to the YouTube link right here, it goes to our YouTube account and it shows past meetings. So if you missed a meeting, you said, gosh, I wonder what Scott was talking about, 2 meetings ago. There you go. And then it should also be showing, here it is, the current live now, 4 people watching. So this is the current meeting, and then these are past meetings.
There's Ted.
So anyway.
Yeah, there's Ted.
Oh,
Ted, you're
wise.
Wait, I thought I already did that.
So you don't even have to go to like to the link at the, just right, just click it right there.
We didn't just introduce a loop.
Like a tear in the fabric of space time. Hope not. Yeah. So.
We'll be good forever.
Yep. So, I've actually used this when I was on business travel, and Jim ran the meeting for me, and I was able to get back to the hotel room and say, well, I'll just, be like an online troll and just listen into it. So it works pretty well. Anything else, Steve? Okay, very good. And George, what, I got you down public relations. Do you have anything you want to say about our public relations?
From the PR side, just as an FYI, new folks, we are on Facebook, we are on Twitter. On Facebook, we actually broke the 1,500 follower mark about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We're at 1,567 followers. For the RMSS website, we're still sitting at 224. That hasn't changed much in a year and a half. It's almost the same. On Twitter, we've got the CSAS account. We've got cleared 1,000. We've got 1,086 there. And for RMSS, we've got 791. So we do have followers. We do get questions. People do know we exist, believe it or not. And I've had a few people say, hey, we're in town. We want to come and see. And we picked up some RMSS folks by that. So it's still a little bit good. And if anybody's interested in helping out in that, I'm looking at lightening my load a little bit. If you're a Twitter or Facebook kind of person, you're interested in public relations, just drop me a note. I'm happy to have you sign up.
Yes.
We want to talk about our pre-meeting social idea?
Do we want to? Okay, we have the pre-meeting social idea now. Jill mentioned tonight, there's a lot of us that will get off of work and then we're kind of killing an hour before we have to come out here for the meeting. And she was thinking, why don't we all, if you're interested, get together. There's this little pub down the street called Trinity. And her idea is,
I'll be there having a pint before the next meeting. Bruce is going to come have a pint with me, and anyone else is welcome to, waste or otherwise enjoy the hour between work and meetings.
Did she say
with a pint.
wasted? Yes.
Drive safe, it's a whole block. So we'll put that on the, social websites.
Jill also get with Jim, and he can modify the calendar to show that pre get together activity kind of linked to each meeting as well. So when people go to the calendar, they can see that right there. Yeah.
With the opportunity that we don't have the social here afterwards, we always have to go somewhere else. It's like, well, there's an opportunity for as well.
So what Jill's referring to is that the Space Foundation is kindly hosting us. We would normally, any other organization charged for the use of this meeting room. Well, Space Foundation provides it. We have an agreement with them. The fees have been waived for the Colorado Springs Astronomical Society, and we appreciate them doing that. Travis, you probably saw him as you walked through the front door. He basically stays over after his full day here. I believe it's uncompensated time, so he's hanging out on his own time with his wife out there. And so when it comes to 8:30, let's be considerate of Space Foundation and Travis, and move on out of here promptly. So that's kind of what that's all about. Just trying to extend the courtesy. Yes.
For the after the meetings, since we do get booted out of here, Fred was just mentioning there's a group of us that get together down the street at Village Inn. I'm going to be on the right hand side. So if you're interested in that, just stop in afterwards. Fred said the group grows, sees every meeting. And from a PR perspective, I was over in England in October, so I stopped in. I was in York, so I stopped in with the York Astronomical Society, and they were very surprised to have somebody from the Colorado Springs Astronomical Society show up. Great meeting. Their place looks like an old church hall. No air conditioning, lots of heat it seemed because it was sweltering in there. But they do basically the same thing we do. Sit around, they had 25, 30 folks, and their guy who presented was absolutely hilarious. It's one of the best presentations I've ever seen. And I invite, say, hey, you guys come to the States, come on to see us. I told them a little bit about us, a little bit about RMSS. And it was very well received. It's a nice thing to do. You travel in, you happen to be someplace, look up the local club, stop in and say hi, introduce yourself. Folks like to hear it, just like we like to hear it when folks stop in for us.
That's it. That's it. In fact, I did the same thing when I was in Adelaide, Australia, and now the Astronomical Society of South Australia is a sister organization to ours, and we get their monthly newsletter. I haven't seen one for a month or two, but typically get them every month from their president. So it's great to have these kind of relationships between organizations, not only internationally, but even up and down the front range as well. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and have us break for, just take a break, socialize. 7:12, we reconvene here at 7:30. And Tom Mullican, I saw you coming late. Are you chewing gum? Did you bring it up for everybody? Okay. Anyway. Oh, I'm sorry. Hold on. One more thing. Vicki.
Oh, books. I have I think it's the last bit
The
of,
latest subscription of.
yeah, the books that the club is downsizing on. A lot of them are outdated texts or duplicates of what the club is keeping. So feel free to come and grab it.
All right. Okay. Don't forget your find that sign up sheet. Sign up. You know, everybody knows what everybody knows how structured and organized I am, so if I start to 2 minutes late, I catch hell for it. What's the matter, dude? Okay, so, welcome back. Part of the break time, it's not just a 5-minute break, use the bathroom, come back, it's actually 15, 20 minutes or so. So you have an opportunity to get to know other people out here, chat with people, and that's a big part of what we do, right? Socialize and get to know one another. So hopefully you had an adequate chance to do that. That being said, the second half of the meeting, now that you've endured the grueling committee reports part, which is our featured speaker. So, Eric, we have a tradition that Eric introduces our speaker, and so I will turn it over to Mr. Eric White.
Tonight we'll have Steve Regal presenting on solar analemma via pinhole photography.
All right, well, good evening. For those of you who don't know me, I am Steve Regal. I've been in Colorado Springs about 3 years now. I retired from the Air Force in 2014. I was excited to move back to town. I have been stationed here for 4 years, 97 to 2001. My wife and I both had been here at separate times in our careers. We are excited to come back. So the talk tonight is what it says. Being able to capture an analemma, that figure-8 track of the sun in the sky, using nothing more than a shoebox with a hole inside. And, well, maybe a little more, but basically that was it. So let's see if this will work. Oh, there we go. Whoa, too much. Back up.
Better to have the lights on or off.
I think on will work. All right, so the solar analemma, what it is the figure-8 shape that the sun makes in the sky if you could take a picture of it at the same moment on every exposure, same time of day. So for instance, this shot here was probably done, I'm going to guess about 2, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So the photographer sets up his camera, orients it to exactly the same way every time he takes a shot, same field of view, everything, and he snaps a shot and records where the sun was at that moment. And over the course of a year, instead of being in the same spot of the sky at the same time, the sun will trace out the figure-8 throughout the course of the year. So that's a full year's worth of data that he's got there. The shape is given by 2 things. The fact that the Earth has a tilted axis, and you all are familiar with this in the seasons. In the summertime, the sun's riding high in the sky. In the wintertime, it rides low. Okay, so the up-down part of it makes sense. At least if you've had a little bit of exposure to astronomy, that part is pretty intuitive. The left-right motion, though, to give you the figure-8, might not be so intuitive. And we get that because the Earth's orbit around the sun is not perfectly circular. It's an ellipse. When the Earth is closer to the sun, happens to be January, we are at our closest point, it's actually going around the sun in its orbit faster than in the summertime when it's farthest from the sun. It's going around the sun just a tiny little bit slower. And this is important because our 24-hour day, the clock that we use, is based on the average time it takes the Earth to spin on its axis and put the noon sun back at the noon point. Well, so imagine I'm the Earth, and I'm going to use one of our visitors in the back. You're the sun. So at noon, I'm pointing straight at you. 24 hours later, I spin around, and now, in this case, I've shifted over in my orbit by about 1 degree. And so in order to point back at you, I have to spin just a little bit more on my axis. It's actually 23 hours and 56 minutes to where I made a full 360 turn. The extra 4 minutes gets me pointing back at the sun. Well, if I'm going faster around the sun in winter, 24 hours later, whoops, I've got to turn an extra little bit to finally get pointing back at the sun. In the summertime, I'm moving just a little bit slower around my orbit. So 24 hours later, I've already turned past the sun. And it's that combination of going around my orbit at a faster rate or at a slower rate relative to a fixed rotational period that gives me the east-west variation in the position of the sun. Put those two together, and it's going up and down in the sky and east and west, and the combined motion traces the figure 8. And I thought, wow, this is really cool. And people have taken pictures of this for several decades now. If you look in old churches, people have been tracing this pattern on the ground for a long time. Historically, they might have done it by setting up a gnomon, a pointer, something that's going to cast a shadow, or maybe have the sunlight project through a hole. And they just simply mark the position on the ground or on a wall, and they've got some dedicated person who every day at the same time is able to go out, mark the position, and eventually they trace the figure 8. In modern times, people said, you know, we've got these things called cameras, maybe. And they use either film cameras or digital cameras. And again, they just simply take the camera, same lens setting, same focal length, same orientation from the same location. And they either fix the camera permanently and come back and take a periodic exposure, or they at least fix the mount so they can just drop the camera into a cradle and have it be oriented the same way each time. And they again come back and take the periodic exposures. Both of these have the really annoying problem that they require you to be physically present at the same location at the same time of day. And this became a problem for me in, let's see, late 2014. I had just retired from the Air Force, had not yet gotten another job. We moved up to Colorado, and I'm thinking, wow, I've always wanted to try the Astronomical League's ANALIMA program, where you actually capture data to trace the figure 8 over a year. Their program assumes you're doing it manually. So you're plotting it every few days at the same time. Well, so I got about 2.5 months into the program, had 2.5 months worth of observations, and got hired as a school teacher. And suddenly my ability to get to my site at the stroke of noon every day or every few days was not working so well. And I couldn't even do it on the weekends because it meant that every single Saturday or Sunday I would have to be physically at the house at noon, travel, other activities. This was just not going to work. And so I said, okay, great. I'd still like to capture an ANALIMA. How do I do it without having to physically be present at the camera all the time? So that was the driving force for the project. Well, for years, I had been doing pinhole solagraphs, where you take a light-tight enclosure, put a tiny pinhole in the side of it, and line the back of the box with a piece of photo paper. In my case, I used just ordinary black and white photo paper. And the light comes through the pinhole. You've made a small camera obscura, and it projects an in-focus image on the back of your container. Well, if you happen to aim this at the sun, you've now got this very bright object traveling through your field of view, and if you let it go long enough, it will eventually create an image, a visible image, on this black and white photo paper. You don't have to develop it. You don't do anything. You actually can look at the paper and see the streak of the sun. The intense sunlight actually alters the chemistry of the black and white paper, and it leaves a visible image of the streak of the path of the sun. And so the developing is simply taking that sheet out of the camera, putting it on a scanner, and scan it. And now you've captured the image permanently. And if you let it go long enough, this is what you can capture. This is a several month, probably pushing 6-month image by a friend of mine down in Albuquerque. Becky has been doing this for many, many years and is incredibly accomplished. But what you're seeing here is each bright streak is the track of the sun for a particular day. And because this is an incredibly long exposure, even at an enormously high F ratio, these cameras are typically somewhere around f200, enormously high F ratios, you still get enough light over time that it will actually burn a visible image so you can see some of the foreground in addition to the bright streaks of the sun behind it. I said, okay, these are cool. Now, if I can set up these cameras, they're unattended, they run all by themselves. But how do I break that up into getting a particular moment in time? And so, okay, so if I had this streak going across the sky, if I could somehow chop it up and only expose it at a certain moment, maybe I could do something like that. This is not an original idea on my part. I happened to find this site. This is a Polish website, and I'll show you the URL here in a moment. But these guys had figured out how to take a simple pinhole camera and instead of just doing streaks of the sun, open up the aperture at intervals. And if they open it up at regular intervals, well, you now have, in this case, this looks like about the noon hour. So there's the position of the sun tracking at the noon hour in their field of view. Again, this is not my idea. I did see their example and then adapted it for my own purpose. But if you click on the link, we can do it later if we want to come back to it. It actually takes you to a site. They do have an English language version, even though it's a Polish hosting site. But they have quite a few examples of some really fabulous multiple analemma photos. So I said, okay, great, I want to try this. Because now I can set up a camera, leave it unattended, and hopefully come back a year later and see what I've got. So the camera. This is my camera. For you astrophotographers, this is the most simple piece of equipment you have ever, this is the camera you have dreamed about. And let me tell you why. It is infinitely in focus. That tiny little pinhole means that the image hitting the back of this camera is always in focus. It doesn't change. If the temperature changes, humidity changes, it doesn't care. There's no focuser drift. So you are always in focus with this. And for those of you who think, wow, I had to collect hours and hours of data, yeah, you got nothing. The image I'll show you at the end of the show here collectively is about, I don't know, 4,400 hours of exposure to get that one image. So the camera, it's simply a foam core box, basically a shoebox made out of foam board. On the inside of it, I opened it up, and I put a piece of cardstock bent into half a cylinder. So from the front, the focal plane curves in a half cylinder inside the camera. I take a sheet of 8x10 photo paper, and I just push it into the camera, and it now lines this curving back plane. On the front of the camera is a little piece of aluminum. This is just a aluminum soda can, and I punched a tiny little pinhole in it. And when I say tiny, it's really, really tiny. You can come up and take a look at it later. But yeah, this camera is probably somewhere in the f200, maybe higher range, depending on the angle the sun's coming through to hit the actual focal plane in the back. Yes?
You're putting the paper in a dark room?
Yes, so it's, you can work under a red safe light. The black and white photo paper is not sensitive to red. So I just literally would go into my bathroom or a closet, something I could tape off the seams, make it relatively dark, get out a red flashlight, load up the camera. So literally put the paper in, close it up, duct tape it up to make it all light tight, and then initially just have a little piece of tape covering the aperture, and so the photo paper is loaded, it's ready to go. The other part I needed was, okay, how do I get the intermittent time? Maybe go ahead and advance one. All right, so the other piece is, you'll notice the pinhole here is set way up high on the box. It's not dead center in the middle. And the reason for that is in the summertime, I've got to be able to catch the sun coming at a very high angle, high overhead. So the sun's coming up through the pinhole, and I did the math to figure out if I put the pinhole here, it's projecting just down to the very bottom edge of the paper in the back of the focal plane. So I just scaled the size of the camera and the position of the pinhole, a little bit of trigonometry to make sure that I could capture at the highest sun elevation the projection of the sun onto the back of the focal plane. In the wintertime, the sun's at a much lower angle, so it comes through and it hits somewhere about here on the back of the camera. So I was getting an image somewhere through about this range on the camera. Yes?
So if you were able to tilt that box back,
Uh-huh.
the cradle came generally toward the celestial equator, then
Yes.
you'd be able to put your pinhole basically in the center.
You could do that, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in my case, since I was using essentially a vertical camera, I had to offset it high because I was going to get that really weird foreshortening and projection, the long shadow kind of effect. And so I use just ordinary black and white photo paper. I prefer a matte finish. The glossy paper seems to reflect the light around inside the camera a little bit too much for me. So the matte papers, I generally find, give you a better result. All right, so now the intermittent time part. On top of the camera, I went out to Hobby Lobby and I found a cheap electric clockwork. And instead of doing just a simple battery, I found another place that had a AA power adapter that it looked like the size and shape of a AA battery, so it would fit here, and then it had a cord that went to the wall, but it actually was a battery. So it was kind of a built-in UPS. It would run on the wall power. If we had a blackout, the battery itself really was a battery. And so it had enough juice to carry several hours until the power came back on. So kind of an unintentional benefit of not interrupting my camera. Took the hands off, but to the shaft that would run the minute hand, glued a little wooden disc and then the paper mask. And I figured out, okay, how many degrees for every minute as the hands are sweeping around the clock. And I cut out a notch that corresponded to about 2 minutes wide. On the back of it, I simply marked in 5-minute intervals the time of day, or time of the hour, so that periodically I could look at the back of this thing and figure out, okay, if the notch is coming down to the bottom, I should have my 1 hour mark, which says, okay, I'm right on the hour, should be pretty high on top of the mask. If it's by my watch coming up on the hour and the 1 hour mark is over here, oh, something's gotten nudged, and it would allow me to correct very quickly and just see that it was still tracking relatively true to time. That feature comes in important later because you'll see in the final image, I actually had a case where for a couple of weeks I hadn't noticed it and the time had gotten skewed. And so my tracking wasn't perfect in that time.
Do you have to adjust for daylight saving time?
No, as a matter of fact, you don't. But what it does then is the image that you'll see that represents the noon hour is the constant noon hour that doesn't care whether or not we swapped through daylight savings time. I just left the clock running. And so once an hour, minute hand carries the mask around, and on the hour, it would uncover the pinhole, and it would uncover the pinhole for 2 minutes every hour. 24 hours a day, 365 days for the entire year. Question?
So how did the 2 minutes provide enough light?
It does. And so let's see if we can back up a couple of slides, one more. So each of these little dots here, in this gentleman's image, I don't know how long his exposure was, but it's comparable to what my camera showed. Each little point of light along the image is maybe, he might have done 1 minute. I chose 2 minutes just to make sure I'd get enough of an image. But yeah, it's enough to make that little dot. The foreground that he captures here, that's the result of those 2 minute intervals every hour across an entire year. So it's the summation of all those little short intervals across an entire year. All right. So 2 minute mask. And so again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for an entire year, I left my camera running. Now, being generous, it's really only going to record data during the daylit hours. So you figure 12 hours a day, and that's where I get the roughly 4,300, 4,400 hours of collective exposure time for the image. So, my first attempt, I started it on New Year's Day of 2015. Set it up in an upstairs window, faced it generally south, started it off, let it go. And when it was all said and done, this is what I got. I'm gonna turn the lights off so you can see the image a little better. And you're looking at it going, oh, wait a minute. Bottom part looks cool, but what happened to the top? No, it wasn't the angle. It turned out, so I thought about this and I realized, I'm gonna turn the lights back on here. When you do pinhole photography, even though the aluminum seems really, really thin, compared to the size of the pinhole, the aluminum was actually pretty thick. And so when I look at the line of sight through it, I actually had more of a cylinder than just a thin hole. And that cylinder causes significant vignetting. It cut off my ability to see the high part of the sky just because, relative to the size of the hole, the thickness really was more of a cylindrical opening. Yes?
Did you make the hole in the first place?
Literally took a straight pin and just very carefully twist drilled it into the aluminum. Yes?
So why did you choose like aluminum from the can versus like aluminum foil?
Well, in retrospect, that might be one thing to look at. One of the reasons I chose the aluminum can is that I found when I tried to use foil, I had a really hard time punching a clean hole in the foil. It would tend to tear and I'd get a jaggedy edge, but I could punch through the aluminum, drill through it, and then with a little bit of sanding, I could sand off the burr, and so I got a much, much cleaner aperture with a slightly thicker piece of aluminum. Yes?
So if you want to do it for just at the same time every day instead of each hour, would you just be able to put the mask on the hour hand?
You could, yeah, you could try that.
And then would that just make the one single loop, or?
It would, yeah, if you put it on the hour hand, because at night it's not going to really record, so only during the daytime hour.
One constant, would that make?
It would make one figure eight. The challenge you'd have there is you'd probably have to cut a much, much thinner slit, because in an hour, your mask is only going to move, through that kind of an angle instead of a full circle. So now you'd be cutting a very narrow slit to account for the fact that as the slow hour hand carries it across, yeah, you want it to be a fairly narrow time. Yes?
One way I found of getting a nice foil for focal testers.
All right.
Fold the foil several times.
Okay.
And you drive the pin in, and as you unbury the layers, you get smaller and smaller.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that technique. So, so I get the first image. It's like, okay, great, I got partial success, but I got to do better. And I want to start the camera again tomorrow. So yeah, this was New Year's Eve 2015, thinking, well, New Year's Day 2016, I'd kind of like to try this again. So I literally got out a piece of sandpaper, and all I did was just sand, and sanded the piece of aluminum a little bit thinner, which has the effect of increasing the field of view. So I reset the camera, new piece of photo paper, put it back in the window on New Year's Day 2016, let it go for a year. And when it was done, this is a scan of the photo paper as it came out of the camera. So you can see, for the moment, it's not a real great image, but you can see these pink dots. That's the actual dot that was burned by the intense sunlight. It chemically altered the paper in that 2-minute interval to leave the dot. And in the final image, you'll be able to see a little bit of the foreground here. But for the moment, it's pretty low contrast. Yes?
What's the arc going through the bottom of the loop?
Ah, good eyes. So the arc he's asking about is right here. You want to take a guess?
Clock failure?
Nope, not a clock failure. That was actually deliberate. I did stop the clock on that day. Not the moon. So think about the arcs here. The bottom of the arc is going to represent what?
Solstice.
The solstice. Which one? Winter solstice. Summer solstice. Arc across the middle, maybe halfway in between. That's the equinox. So I stopped the clock on one of the two equinoxes. I can't remember at this point, to be honest, if it was the spring or the fall. But that streak represents the streak of the sun across the sky on the equinox.
What's the point when they cross that? Wouldn't that be?
That, we'd have to go back into some orbital mechanics, and I'd have to think about why the equinox and the crossover point don't match.
If the eccentricity of the Earth's orbit were 0, then that crossover point would be at the equinox. But because the eccentricity is non-zero, it's displaced to the north or south.
There we go.
That's why.
So that's how it came out of the camera. All I did, so you basically, it's a negative image that's imprinted on the photo paper. So I take it out of the camera, and it's, you'll also notice it's mirror flipped. The imagery coming through the pinhole to the focal plane in the back of the camera makes a mirror reversed image on the paper. So I take it out, I put it on a flatbed scanner, and I scan it. And I'm not so worried about the intense light because, well, the whole image has been made by intense light. And once I get that first scan done, I've at least captured and preserved the image that was on the paper at that moment. So I scan it, I invert the colors to go from being a negative image to a positive image. And then I also do a mirror flip left to right to give it a correct orientation. At that point, it's still a really low contrast image, so I put a huge contrast stretch on it. But aside from doing a contrast stretch, increasing the contrast in the image, what you're about to see has no other color enhancements. So the paper that you saw in the negative, scanned, color inverted, contrast stretched, results in that. And so on this image, I ended up capturing a total of 5 complete and 4 partial analemas in one exposure that happened to total something 4,400 hours of actual daylight. Make it happen. Now, we mentioned earlier that thing about being able to check that your clock drive was still recording on the hour about where it should be. Notice right in here, there's about a 2-week break, couple of weeks break in the fall time frame, and the dots kind of scatter off to the side. I don't know what happened. Remember, I said this is a cheap electric clock. I'm guessing that one of the gears glitched, jammed, started slipping, and oh, wait a minute, instead of recording on time, the image is drifting and drifting and drifting. So something was slipping inside the clock drive, and it wasn't until about 2 weeks later I noticed, hey, wait a minute, my time isn't looking right, reset the clock, and then it finished out the year tracking normally. So minor aberration for those couple of weeks. Had I been paying closer attention, I probably could have caught it sooner. But that is the image. Send it into spaceleather.com and also to the Polish website. Somewhere buried in it, they have that image. And at least for the moment, I have yet to find another example that has 9 analemas in any state of completeness. I saw one that had, I think, 7, but to get 9, at least partial figures in one image, this might be the current world record holder for number of analemas on a single frame. I can't confirm it, but all right, that's actually my one really cool contribution to astrophotography. Yes?
So is there ever a case with photography where it puts the image upside down rather than side to side?
Yeah, it actually does record in the camera. It's upside down and backwards because as the sun is coming in, it's really high on the sky in the summer, but it's actually recording the summer sky down here on the bottom of the paper. And in the winter sky, it's low in our sky, but it's recording much higher on the image here. Yeah, so it is coming through upside down, mirror reversed through the camera. All right, so the next question is, where do you go from here? Lights coming on. So I sent this off to the Astronomical League Analema program and said, hey, here's a technique I've got that this might make it easier for people to do. And they came back and said, yeah, we're not sure you can get the measurements we want you to do off that. It's pretty, but we're not sure it's technically going to work. And so the next step might be to build a larger camera box with a flat focal plane. And now if you've got a flat plane, it's a lot easier to do the geometry of azimuth elevation to record that data, because that's what the AL wanted, was what was the as-L to the sun at each of your measurements. Hard to measure that off a curved focal plane because I can't guarantee it was absolutely a perfect hemicylinder. So maybe a flat focal plane would facilitate doing the math to measure that. Other options. Okay, so if I can get a flat one to work, can I do the Astronomical League's program from it? Well, one of the problems that they have is they want you to be able to mark the position of the equinoxes and the solstices. Well, the solstices are easy, top and bottom. Equinox, that's a little more challenging because, again, it would be nice to be able to mark the specific date somewhere in your data. And again, you can stop the clock, get a streak going across it, but I hadn't quite figured out how I would capture exactly the requirement they were looking for. And then finally, they want fairly fine time resolution. In their program, they make it seem like if you're even a few seconds off on your daily measurement, oh my goodness, you've blown it all out of the water. And that may be just somebody's, interpretation of that was his level of perfection, and they kind of carried through into the instructions. Clearly, with a 2-minute interval, yeah, the dot smears out a little bit, but relatively speaking, you could make the measurements, and at least on the order of several minutes, realize the sun is running early or late on the order of many minutes. You just probably couldn't get what they call the equation of time down to seconds of precision. So I don't know if they would accept it or not, but I think it would be a worthwhile effort. So it's something I might try. And then the last one, and this is where it gets really crazy, is imagine instead of just facing generally south and capturing whatever field of view I have to the south, angle one of these, because these have about 160-degree field of view. So imagine angling one to the southeast and one to the southwest, run them simultaneously. If you capture the entire sweep of the sun across the entire sky for an entire year with 2 of these cameras running simultaneously. And I think that would be a phenomenal image if you could set it up. The problem I have now, the reason I haven't started another one, is the house we moved into, I lost the great southern view I had in the previous rental, and so I haven't figured out where the heck do I put this silly camera that's weather protected, has the field of view of the sky that I want. So I'm still sorting out where the next project's going to be. But that's the basic idea of using a simple pinhole camera to capture the solar annual. Thank you. For everybody who's interested, this is basically a life-size copy of the image, 8 by 10. So we just simply had it printed up, but that's basically what it turned into as the final image. So you can look at that a little closer if you like. So a couple of questions. Yes?
Just something I noted, if anybody knew, there used to be a 360-degree camera set up on top of Pikes Peak. It was recently replaced. One of the reasons they replaced it was because the cameras had just gotten so old, and a huge storm came through and basically took the tower out.
Okay.
But before those images came down on the old cameras, the old CCDs, that streak, I mean, over all these years, it was many, many years that thing was up there.
Right.
You could watch them go. You can see the entire motion of the sun burned in, literally, on those cameras. You can measure that with everything, just what you were talking about. You can see it from start to finish. Cool. It's rather interesting to see. I don't know what cameras that you have up there now, but they seem to be a little bit more sensitive to the bright lights. So okay. They're dimming themselves automatically.
Cool. Yes.
You didn't point it out, but in the loops, there's gaps.
Yes. Weather.
I believe that's clouds, right?
It is. Yeah. So basically, let's go back to the image here. There are places where you see the intermittent gaps around the figure 8. Those are simply literally cloudy days where at that particular moment of the day, the sun was behind a cloud. Some days it was cloudy all day, some days it was cloudy in the morning or the afternoon, but it varied. Yes?
So would there be any way to get around that if we were to with an actual camera, like for the astronomical league?
Well, the problem is, the sun is behind a cloud. You're pretty much out of luck. You got to be able to see the sun.
So there will be gaps.
There's almost certainly going to be gaps. most of the people that have done it photographically, they set a schedule and they try to get out every 2, 3, 4 days maybe. But they understand that, yeah, there could be a stretch where the weather is just crummy, and so they deal with it.
But you have an advantage here in Colorado because we advertise 300 days of blue sky.
Yep.
Was there any particular reason you didn't develop and fix the photographic data?
Yes, as far as trying to develop it, because of the incredibly long exposures that you have, as soon as if I had taken that paper and put it into a developer, it would have gone dead black. It would have just instantly overexposed itself. And so it's just had so much light. Even the parts that didn't look like there was an image had enough bleed over, it would have ghosted, and it would have just gone instantly black if I had tried to develop it. I have not tried to put an image like that into a fixer. I honestly don't know what would happen. I don't know if it would say, well, if you haven't gone through the developing process, the silver hasn't gotten to the right state, and if it would destroy the image or not.
Right, exactly. The fixer just stops the developing process. You don't stop it.
Well, no. Fixer, there you have a stop valve which stops the development. The fixer then takes the image that has formed and now been developed and preserves that, and then the rest of it is allowed to. But yeah, it desensitizes everything else so that it no longer is affected by the light. Yeah.
So you got a color image from black and white paper?
Yes, and like I say, this is where the color that you see is, it was a black and white piece of paper. The original negative has kind of a peachy, orangey cast, which, when you invert that color, happens to come out as this kind of pink, the pinkish dots of the sun image come out as a bluish green. This is just the weirdness of the chemistry in the paper. It's that intense sunlight, for 2 minutes at a time on that tiny little spot, literally does alter the chemistry of the paper. I have not tried color. So yeah, there's lots of different variations that might be worth giving a go. What's really cool is you never know what color the paper is going to give you. I've tried different brands and different environmental conditions. This was inside in my house, just shooting through a window in a spare bedroom. I had one where I made a pinhole camera, left it taped to my fence post for 6 months just to record the streaks of the sun. Took it out of the camera, scanned it, inverted the colors, and it was in the most amazing, shocking red and orange tones, just because that's what the paper decided to give me based on whatever temperature cycling and everything it had been through. It's really weird. And you look at it and like, oh, that's false color, right? No, that's simply inverted color and stretched, and that's what the paper gave me. And it's really kind of cool. So you never know what you're going to end up with. But it's kind of fun, and like I say, I keep thinking about where can I set up the next camera to try this one again. The nerve-wracking part is, you worry about, oh, gee, we did an entire night's imaging. Did I get anything useful? I got to do 365 nights to get to that point. And then you open it up a year later, did I get anything useful? You can't check it in the middle. You can't do a progress check. So you have hope. And if you get lucky, you get something really cool.
So when you're done,
yes.
When the year's over, are you in a dark room at the time that you take this out?
Not completely. I did a dim room, but I still had enough light that it was not like a dark room with red safe lights. It was just my office with the room lights off, getting a little bit of light bleed through from the hallway. But again, the paper, remember, has been exposed to direct light for a year in various points. So a tiny little bit of room light, far less intense than the sunlight, if I don't leave it out for a long, long time, isn't going to affect it a lot. Put it on the flatbed scanner, that brilliant light scans the page, and you can take it off. Well, and it doesn't look a whole lot different at that point. And if you did it enough times, you would eventually start to see the gray, but that's about it. Sure.
So, imagine while the hole was covered, you still have ambient light because there's a gap between that.
You do, and so there is a tiny little bit of bleed-through light, which is another reason why if you tried to develop it, you've hyper-fogged the paper and it would just go black. But because it's so diffuse, basically through the pinhole, the light that's coming through is basically the, you know, when the thing is covered, it's looking at the backside of the paper here. I'm trying to remember.
It could have been black.
Yeah, I could have spray painted the backside black too. Maybe that would have improved contrast. I don't know. So again, improvements, things you can try. But for a first couple of attempts, I was pretty happy.
What kind of clearance did you have? Just a millimeter or so?
Yeah, it was really pretty snug. So when this was sitting attached, you know, you've got kind of like this kind of clearance, just not even a quarter inch between the mast and the pinhole. Because remember, if I did just a solar graph, the pinhole's uncovered for the entire duration. So the tiny extra little bit of bleed through light that I get, because it's not totally light tight, relatively is negligible. It's actually far less light coming in now than it would have scattered light with the aperture open for a year.
You probably didn't need to be in a very dark room to load the camera.
Not really.
I know you can take a piece of black and white paper and you can lay things on it like a leaf or a comb and leave it out in the sunlight for a few days, and you get this brown piece of paper with white where the object was.
And
so
that's,
you do silhouettes that way.
And that's
with paper.
In essence, what you're doing with the pinhole camera.
Exactly. A negative of that.
Yeah.
Instead of the object. And so, yeah, you ruin it for trying to develop it and do photography with it. But for this, it doesn't matter. So you could probably just load it in a dim room or whatever.
And that's some people have said,
you don't really need the red light.
No, the only reason I when I was loading it, that I did it in a dark room, like black room with red light, was because I didn't want to then expose all the rest of the photo paper in the pack. So I needed to be able to take a sheet of photo paper out of the package that I had without exposing the rest of that paper. So I did under normal protocols for photo there. But yeah, when it came time to take it out of the camera, no worries. Any other questions on it? Not? Thank you much.
Certainly. Well, I would like to present to you the coveted Colorado Springs Astronomical and RMSS coffee mug. So thanks for doing it.
All right. Another bed. That's pretty awesome. That is so cool. So thank you again for your presentation. We have no further business. Before I convene the meeting or adjourn the meeting, is there anything that anyone has to bring up, or did I forget something? Or Tom, you're still here. Still here. Well, let's see. And then Bruce, you walked in with Morganator. Hey.
Ready for fear.
You didn't get to sign up for the holiday party. If you want to bring a dish?
Bruce put that
right
out,
here.
right? Yeah. All right.
And that's the attendance sheet.
Okay. Again, don't forget, if you haven't filled in the attendance sheet, please do. I think all the visitors got cards, correct? You all filled them out. If you haven't, just go back there. All right, so remember, no meeting in December. For members, we'll have our holiday dinner, Christmas party here at the Space Foundation Area 51 room. Come back in January. Our next meeting will be the fourth Tuesday in January. That's our annual show and tell meeting. So that's the one where right after Christmas, we come in and say, well, this is what I got. And it's a lot of fun. So until then, no other business. I'm going to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
That's very cool.